Welcome. Welcome back to the live show. First live show done in several months. Instant reaction podcast, making sure that it's working over here on the YouTube, over here on this screen. It's working. I can close that now. Iowa Hawkeyes, 30-7 winners over Kent State. Again, welcome in on this 18th day of September 2021. The Iowa Hawkeyes, fifth ranked Iowa Hawkeyes, move to 3-0 on this young season. A lot to talk about from this game, and you can be a part of the conversation. Those of you watching, you can see right there. Join the free text group at 515-574-7216. Just send a text to that says join, and you'll be in. Then you can send your question, or you don't have to say join. Just send it in. Those of you that are listening to this after the live version in the podcast form, you too can still sign up to be a part of the Hawkeye podcast text line text service. We'll be using that more and more as the year goes along. As I mentioned, 30-7, Iowa victorious in this game. It wasn't a clean sheet, as the kids like to say. At least the kids maybe over in England when they're talking about soccer. But let me pull up the screen share here and let those of you that are watching see the stats that I'm seeing. And for those of you listening post de facto, as I turn off my mentions, you can hear we're going to talk about this. Let me turn that off as well. Just a lot of things going on. So Iowa with 440 total yards of offense. And in the first half, Iowa had 261 yards of offense. So, that's 440 yards of offense for Iowa is a good afternoon. 212 passing, 228 rushing. Iowa gets the balance that they like to look for. 37 passing attempts, 38 rushing attempts. Again, they love to have that balance. Iowa 7 of 16 on third downs. Seemed like Iowa was in a lot of third and longs today. Actually, their average distance to gain on third down was 6.6 yards on their third down attempts. First down gains, Iowa ran 31 first down plays, averaged 5.4 yards on first downs. This was like 3.4 at halftime. So in the second half, Iowa did a lot better on first down. Spencer Petras this game, 25 of 36. 36, now here we go. 36 passes is high. It's high. What it tells me is that Iowa is doing what I anticipated that they would do with this game, as well as next week's game against Colorado State. And I'm not saying I'm a genius. Most of you knew this as well or anticipated it. And that is this past week of practice leading into the Kent State game, then the game, and then next week of practice leading into the Colorado State game, and then the game would be two of the most valuable weeks of development for this Iowa offense of the entire season. Just as valuable as what they did in August camp. Just as valuable, especially with return of Kyler Schott, who was being mixed in along the line today. He'll look better than he did today. He looked like a guy that was playing his first game and has been out and has been missing practices. He wasn't crisp. But so obviously the Kent State game was going to be the most difficult of the next two. Colorado State is horrible. They're very bad. And Iowa could play half as well as they did today and probably win that game next week by 3 touchdowns. Kent State, top 3 team in the MAC this year. Ball State's salty. Toledo is salty. We all saw what Toledo did against Notre Dame last week. And Kent State. One of those 3 teams is likely going to emerge as the winner in the MAC. So Kent State, solid team. Solid team. Iowa, as we all know from watching Iowa football through all these many Kirk Ferentz era years, invites a stacked line of scrimmage or a stacked box, frequently with 8 players from the opposition in the box to take away Iowa's run game. This game was no different, and at times Iowa struggled in the run, but Iowa's running game today, very successful. Again, Iowa gets 228 yards on the ground. They average 6 yards per carry, led by Tyler Goodson with 22 totes of the rock, 153 yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry, along of 46. I believe he had another touchdown run that was north of 30 yards. So great day for him. Not so great for Ivory Kelly Martin. And you hate to see it because IKM is a very beloved player in that locker room, very well respected. And the fact that he fumbled a couple of times today isn't going to change the fact that he's respected. But in the first 3 games, the ball has come out of his control 4 times. One of those times last week against Iowa State, he was ruled down correctly, but the ball still came out. He lost a fumble in the first game against Indiana. He lost a fumble today, and he had another fumble that was recovered by an Iowa player. And after that happened, he didn't see the field again. Iowa went to the bench. They went to Gavin Williams, who had 4 carries for 17 yards. Gavin's young, so there's going to be instances where he's got to hammer down and not slow down into the line of scrimmage, which he did a couple of times, which is not an uncommon thing for young players to do. But he also factored into the passing game. He caught 3 passes for 14 yards. So he's going to bring you a similar skill set to Ivory Kelly Martin. It was, and again, this is nothing against IKM. It was encouraging for me to see Iowa go to the hook and put in a young player like that. You fumble the ball the way that IKM's fumbling it, you can't be out there. You can't be out there. And I think that Gavin Williams today took several steps into being in Ferentz's very small circle of trust. And I think he competed and he performed. He performed at a good level to where I bet his role and his carries are only going to go up. And I don't like seeing that for IKM, but you know what? It's kind of like somebody gets injured. It's next man in. Unfortunately, IKM basically took himself out. 10 tackles for loss in this game, 7 sacks. I did not expect to see those numbers, especially with the type of quick pace, get the ball out quick offense that Kent State had. Iowa defense scores 2 points. They get it on a safety. They force a fumble. Justin Jacobs credited with his 2nd forced fumble in as many weeks. Those are the only 2 forced fumbles on the season. He's got both of them. And for Kent State, it was 16-7. They were 1 yard away from making it 16 to likely 14. Totally different game. And Iowa forces the fumble. It was a touchback. Iowa scores on the next drive. And at that point in time, it was 16-23-7. And when the Iowa defense has, it was still 2 possessions, but it also meant Kent State had to get 2 point after conversions. It's pretty much over. You get into the boa constrictor levels at that juncture in the 4th quarter when you're down 2 possessions rather, to the Iowa defense that played great once again. 265 yards of offense for Kent State. Just 185 through the air. Didn't it feel a little worse than that? Maybe you felt the same way that I did, that it felt a little worse than that, but 185 yards, 80 on the ground. Some of that came late in the game. Kent State averaging just 2.0 yards per carry, which is the bigger number there. Other things that stand out to me, this is something that I talked about last week in the Instant Reaction podcast, and something I tweeted about this morning in a Twitter thread that I had relative to the things I was looking for in this game. I could be really arrogant and egotistical and go back and find that thread and say, yep, not going to do that. You can do it for me if you want. But one thing I did point out is I really wanted to see Iowa get the ball more into wide receivers' hands in this game, specifically Tracy. And Tracy tied Sam Laporta in this game with 7 targets. So Tracy with 7 targets through the first 2 games, according to Pro Football Focus, which I subscribe to. He had 5 targets and 3 receptions. This game, 5 receptions, 43 yards. He slipped early in the game on his first reception. He would have had another 15 yards after that. It would have been a first down. More importantly, Iowa had to punt because of that. There was another play that he was screwed on. Should have had 15 more yards and another reception, but that was a horrible reversal of a catch and ruled an incompletion. One of the worst calls I've ever seen. Made worse more so by the fact that it was actually reviewed and they overturned the ruling on the field that was a catch. I do not know what was conclusive and incontrovertible from that replay video. I think it's bullcrap. And maybe you agree. Maybe you disagree. I'm guessing most of you do agree. But at any rate, I'm just going to make sure that is it chat. Those of you in the chat, is the audio and video working okay? I just want to make sure I don't have another lost podcast episode like I did last week. So let me know that the audio and video are both working. If you don't mind over here. Social comments right here. Yep. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, okay, now let's get to Spencer Petras. 25 of 36 for 209 yards. Let me see if I can find some average per attempt, because it's not going to be good. It's not going to be where they want to be. I'm sure I can do the math. I don't even know that I need to. We all know that it wasn't great. Average per attempt. I mean, I guess I got a calculator here. My green calculator that I have green so that I can actually see it clearly on my desk. 209 divided by 36, 5.8 yards per attempt. Yeah, that's no bueno. There were times in this game, like the completion that Spencer threw to Tracy that was ultimately overturned by that bad call. There were times where I thought Petras looked good. And I knew that was going to be a completion as he threw it, because his footwork and just the pace, the tempo of his throw, like, that's good. Just like last week when I was watching the Iowa State game and the eventual touchdown pass to Charlie Jones, right when he released it, I was sitting next to my dad. I'm like, oh, that's good. Just because you can tell by his feet and his tempo. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for every player that plays quarterback for the University of Iowa, even though some of you may think that I am. I think it's not all on Spencer. We had Tracy slipping and falling the first series that led to a punt. We had a flat-out drop that would have been a first down. We had a fumble in the first half that Iowa lost. Those are 3 drives right there that ended, that would have kept going had there just been simple football execution. Catch the ball when you're supposed to catch it, make a cut and not fall down, and don't fumble. It's 3 drives in the first half. And Iowa's field position when they got those drives was very advantageous. So another set of downs, you're probably talking, I would bet, at least 10 points. Okay, so now it's 40-7. And stats look better. So, but that being said, Spencer continues to struggle looking off his primary receiver, going through his progressions, and seeing the complete field. Now, I'm not saying those things are easy to do, but when you're playing quarterback at the Big Ten level, those are things that you have to get. And Petras is now, 8 games last – he's played 11 games. So technically not even really a full season, but he had the offseason this year that he didn't have last year. Spencer just the next week, so this next week in practice, the game against Colorado State, and then the week of practice for Maryland, I'm really hoping that we see Spencer take some steps. Can significant steps like that happen in such a short amount of time? Some of you are wondering. Yes, they can. They can happen. I think you're going to see it happen for the offensive line. I think there's no doubt that right now your tackles are Mason Richmond on the left and DeJong, number 56, on the right. Shooter, I think, will wind up at right guard, putting Britt in the 2 deep at the on the 2 line, and Ince will be your left guard with, of course, Lindy at center. I would not sleep at all on young Mr. Colby. I believe he is your right tackle next season. And I think, maybe DeJong goes inside, and then you have Ince and Britt probably slides to center. So that, they're going to return a ton of experience along the offensive line next year. Iowa's going to return a ton next year. I heard somebody saying earlier this week that Iowa State's losing 16, 17 starters. He might be another year before Iowa State has a chance to win that trophy back. But what am I doing bringing up Iowa State today? There's no need for that. There's no need for that at all. So grades, quick hitter grades without having gone and watched through the second time. This week, actually, there will be the BTN and 60-minute replay. Last week, the reason there wasn't is because ABC owned the rights to that, and the Big Ten. That's got to be the reason. Since this is a BTN game, you'll be able to see the BTN and 60 version of this game probably tomorrow around 3 o'clock Central Time. So I'll look forward to watching that a couple of times. I would give Petrus a B-. I would give the offensive line a B to B-. The receivers, B-. The running back, Tyler Goodson, he gets an A. Tory Taylor, perpetual A. Dude is a punting deity, as I have said. He is God tier relative to a punter. Let me go to special teams for this day. Tory Taylor, 4 punts, an average of 51.5. One of those was a touchback that hit the freaking pylon. A long of 60. A completed pass. It was a bad call. It's 4th and 4. You try to draw the other team off sides because you're at the plus 50 territory. You take the delay of game penalty, and then you go for the fake punt. I don't know about that one. Don't know. But I do know about that one. It's bad. It's not advisable. You wouldn't want to do that. Kent State kept Mr. Jones in check today. He had 1 kickoff return for 25 yards, 6 punt returns for -2 yards. On the whole, defense, another A. So it looked like Riley Moss might have got beat a couple of times. I think one time it looked like he was dropping back and he was playing zone because he flattened out his chase technique and stopped. That meant he thought that Kayvon Merriweather was going to be over top of him in the 2-deep coverage. So either Moss was wrong about that or Merriweather was wrong about that. One of the two. Somebody was wrong. And the big first play that happened against Moss, it looked like he caught his eyes looking in the backfield relative to the zone read action that Kent State was running. It was really effective, by the way. They had success in the first half really moving Iowa's linebackers a lot with that action. It was a really good zone read action. And Moss got caught looking in the backfield once, which Moss is a veteran. He trusts his chase technique and his ability to get on his horse. So the older you get, the more experienced you get, you do start playing with eyes more in the backfield. The more film that you read and see, things start to look like the Matrix with ones and zeros coming down, and you no longer see a world, you just see data. You see tells that make you, okay, I watched this, here's what's going to happen. It serves him well. We'll continue to serve him well. I'm not worried at all about Riley Moss. But I think he got his eyes caught in the backfield. And that zone read stuff, it's meant to slow people down a half step. It's meant to move linebackers one way towards what looks like it's going to be a handoff, and then you hit them over the middle with a clean passing lane, which looked to me like what happened on their lone touchdown. Linebackers were moving over on the zone read play action to the right side of the field. They didn't get back in their drops enough, and that made it an easier throw. It was still pretty well defended by Dane Belton. Sometimes the other team just makes good plays, and that was a good play. It was their one touchdown in the day. Jack Campbell, he's everything everybody said he would be. 11 tackles. He had a half sack. Justin Jacobs, the second leading tackler, and I don't know that he play. I mean, how many plays did Kent State run this game? 64. By the way, Iowa ran 75 plays, which is a lot of plays for Iowa football. 64 plays. I don't know that Jacobs was on the field more than 40 plays, and he was the second leading tackler. Jack Corner is having a hell of a season. He is one of the most clean, sure tackling safeties Iowa has had in a long time, and that's saying something. That doesn't mean that previous guys that played before him weren't good tacklers. Corner's just another level good, really freaking good. Seldomly out of position. No, nobody's perfect. Luke Van Ness with 7 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. Moss had a TFL. Joe Evans, with 2 sacks. Zach Van Valkenburg, 1.5 sacks. I mean, Jack Wagner, Wagner's playing really well. And I think Wagner's going to continue to get better. Hold on one second, because my dogs, I think, are going for an empty box of Raising Cane's chicken. Hey, where do you guys go? Yeah. So those of you watching the live version of this, that's a little extra bonus material for you. I'll probably edit it out in the audio portion. Who doesn't like a little Cane's chicken? Oh, you don't have those very many places in Iowa? Sorry. So, what was I talking about? Zach Van Valkenburg doing really well. I think you're going to see him continue to climb the ladder. I'm sorry. Not Van Valkenburg. I'm talking about Wagner. I think you're going to continue to see Wagner climb the ladder as the season rolls along, week by week, maybe even next week to the next with these developmental weeks that Iowa has, just like Van Valkenburg did last year. Van Valkenburg started out a little slow last year as he made the adjustment to Big Ten football. And then by the end of the season, he was really good. One of the leading one of the leading sackers in the Big Ten Conference. I think that you're going to see something similar from Wagner this year. This defensive line, this no-name defensive line, as I call them, they are getting better. And just as I was talking about that, the offensive line and the gelling opportunity that they have during these 2 weeks of practice with these 2 games, I kind of winced at myself referring to the Kent State game as a glorified scrimmage. It wasn't. They're a salty team. Colorado State will be. You got to work on the things that you want to improve at. And so many defensive linemen are playing. They're rotating them in. Guys, by the end of the season, these guys could be fearsome up front without an Epinesa, without an Ott, without pick your great sacker, without a Davion Nixon, without those types of players. It's just a collection probably of mutts, if you will. I'm not saying that none of these guys were. I mean, Noah Shannon had some interest. Why Black, I think, he's got a chance to really go from, oh yeah, that guy has some talent, but he's still young. You can tell that he's young, to the end of the year, like, wow, this guy's really good. Because everybody I've talked to over there or who's close to the program believes that why Black isn't going to be around for all of his eligibility. We'll see. We shall see. All right. Have I yapped long enough before we go to questions? And by the way, again, if you would like to potentially have some of your comments and questions be a part of this program, join the free text group at 515-574-7216. I appreciate those of you that are typing things in the chat. I really am. It's just really difficult for me to find things in any sort of order by pulling questions out of the chat. So sign up for the text line 515-474-7216, and I'll pull them that way. I'm going to go over here to this, hit refresh, and we will scroll down to the bottom of it. Wow, there are so many. I really appreciate all of you to do this. And again, I'm not going to read 25 or 30 comments about Petrus. We'll read a few. This is from Bill Delahant. Petrus is averaging less than 4.5 yards per attempt. It's better than that, but still in the not good area. What was this offensive game plan? Looking like crap against ranked teams is one thing. Against the MAC is another. Jury is in on him. I don't think he looked like crap. And as far as the game plan is concerned, I have talked about that. I just feel like Iowa was going out to work on the things that they felt like they needed to work about. Could Iowa have put up 350 yards rushing this game? Yes, they could have. I'm going to pull up Kent State's game against Texas A&M. Kent State football, ESPN, because I want to look at the stats of that one real quick. Because, again, Iowa could have gone out and just kept running and running and running and running. And, what would that have done? A&M had 595 total yards, 292 through the air, 303 rushing. So A&M got a good workout in that game. Kent State had 336 against A&M. A&M also had five turnovers. So there goes that hypothesis. I don't think Petras was crap, but I'm not going to – he has to get better. There is a Big Ten championship level defense being played in Iowa City. Probably one of the 5 best defenses in college football. I don't think anybody would argue with that. Even, someone who watches a lot of football, Kirk Herbstreit would probably agree with that. But the offense only needs to be average. They just need to be average. And that will be enough to be 10-2 at a minimum. They're not there yet. They have time because they went 2-0. Somehow they went 2-0. These next 2 games were one of the greatest gifts of any period of time in season in the Ferentz era to get better and gel and work forward. There have been, 3-4 times maybe in the Ferentz era, maybe it's more than that, where there was a game in September where Iowa lost that they shouldn't have lost. Sometimes it's a match school. Some years it was to do an Iowa State team that wasn't good. And the reason for that is because they are a developmental program whose offense and offensive line hadn't gelled yet, but they ultimately do. Iowa went 2-0. Maybe Indiana isn't a top 25 team. Who knows? They played number 7th ranked Cincinnati, really, really tight game today. But so what? They are going to gel these next 2 weeks. I think they can get to average. Am I being optimistic? Maybe I am. We'll see. Hopefully they get to be average, because if they get to be average, we're going to have a lot of fun. Blaine Kupka says, did Greg Davis call this game? Nothing in the deep middle, no shots deeper than 20 yards, lots of horizontal and checkdowns currently at White. So some of you guys probably sent this in before the long completion to Nico Reganey relative to your 4.6. The biggest right now, the 2 biggest things relative to Petras that are most frustrating to me is he is still not maturing with pocket presence the way that I think he should be at this point. And pocket presence is a lot of things. It's taking sacks last week against Iowa State where he should have thrown it away. It's locking on to your primary target and not seeing anybody else, not at least looking to your left or your right to see if somebody's breaking open deep middle. He does not do a good job of that. And then feeling things that aren't there sometimes. He doesn't do it. There are times in addiction groups that you're in, hopefully not you, that I've been in, during my AA days, they call it for alcoholics moments of clarity. When in the midst of your addiction, you have moments or days of sobriety. There are times when Petras has this relative to football, when his footwork is great, his plant foot is perfect, his crow hop is there, his delivery tempo is exactly where you want it to be. And those times when I see those things, that's why that's completion. You know it. And typically it is. He just doesn't do that enough. He gets in a hurry mentally. And it's just he's got to get past that. So those of you watching this, there might be some pauses as I look for some of these questions that I will edit out whenever I'm doing whenever the podcast comes out. Austin Hackfort says, has the offense lost all confidence in Petras considering Brian only calls line of scrimmage screens for Petras? He doesn't only call line of scrimmage screens for Petras. He calls other plays. And there are other receivers that have deep routes. It's that Spencer isn't confident or comfortable right now enough to go to those. Maybe he will as the offensive line becomes better. Keep in mind one thing, too. In camp, the offensive line, which was working in a number of very green and inexperienced players at tackle and some at guard, every day was going up against one of the top 5 defenses in the nation. And as camp continues to progress more, the defense knows what's coming. So Petrus isn't getting hit in practice, but when the defense is in your backfield less than 2 seconds after you snap the ball half the time in practices, I don't know. Maybe that gets a little bit PTSD, DE, comma Y. I don't know. Am I maybe reaching here? Probably. So we'll just see how they develop. Petrus question, Petrus question, Petrus question. I mean, it's like, folks, there's other things that happen in the game other than Petrus. And I'm going to talk about Petrus. Okay. So I may have to put a Petrus embargo on questions and that I'm just not going to read them. We'll be critical of Petrus when it's called for. Russ Scott says, what's up with Goodson dancing at the line of scrimmage? IKM is hitting the line at full speed. Goodson's vision is better than IKM's. It's significantly better. He's looking for cutback lane. He also has the spin cycle left bumper move. And over the course of a game, give me Goodson. Yeah, IKM makes a decision and goes, and sometimes situations call for that. But he also has 3 fumbles. So Brian Finley in Springfield Mo says, is Iowa ever going to go away from the zone blocking scheme? Not under the Ferentz regime. No, they're not. I mean, they mix in some power O. They sometimes do gap, but it's rare. But they do mix it in. Darren Graber says, please talk about what seems to be Iowa's offensive philosophy of simply scoring more points than the opponent versus scoring as many points as you can. Kirk is relative to his peers, I think, more risk averse. He coaches games more like it's an NFL game. And there are a lot of things that can happen on offense, and many of them are bad, is what I think Kirk thinks sometimes. But Kirk has had top 20 to top 15 national defenses more often than not in his 21, 22 years as Iowa's head coach. He knows he has another one this year. He also knows, and Brian knows, that this offense is a work in progress right now. They're not where they're going to be, not by a long shot. So I think today they came out and tried to work on some things that they want to become more competent in. I think a case could be made that a lot of what we saw today is typically the plays that you see Iowa's offense run most frequently. Again, today was kind of like a practice in some ways, a scrimmage against a quality scrimmage opponent. Next week's going to be the same, just a less quality opponent. Iowa, you've heard me say this before. Go out and make the makeables. Go out and make the makeables. The makeables are the plays that you know that you're going to have the highest degree of success making. Okay? Iowa ran a lot of those today. Passes in the flat. They try to run the waggle. Although with Petrus, I am not a fan of them calling plays where Petrus throws on the run, because he's not shown the ability to be that. And matter of fact, he might be one of the worst quarterbacks that I've seen at Iowa when throwing on the run in the Ferentz era. So I would not call those plays specifically unless the other team is just housing you and you need to move the pocket every now and then. Randy Sexton says, lots of Iowa fans will complain about the delay of game fake punt, which I already have. But without stats, Tory Taylor has no shot at winning Heisman. That's what we need, Barn. That's what we need. Christopher Ferris said, it's disappointing Iowa couldn't put them away earlier and get the backups experience. Seems like a theme throughout the Ferentz era. It has been a theme in the Ferentz era, but I'm not interested in this game or next game, honestly, in getting up early, the starters only playing a half, and then bring in the backups. I want that off, maybe the backup center. I want the offensive line out there growing. I want these defensive linemen out there growing. I want Petrus out there getting on the same page with his receivers and being behind an offensive line that is giving him time so he can get his headspace comfortable. I get what you're saying, And there are times when what you're saying absolutely has a great deal of merit. Right now, the offensive starters need all the work they can get. They need all the work they can get. Defensively, yes, that would be nice. That would be nice. Tim McLaughlin says, Tracy catch reversal. Was that the worst call at Kinnick since Northwestern ripped off C.J. Beathard's helmet in 2014 and the refs swallowed their whistles and fans threw water bottles on the field? It was really bad. It is really bad. I've bitched about it a lot. I can't say anything more than that. Russ Donner says, Petrus looked better. Goodson looked great. Is it because Shooter is back? I would say no. I don't think it's because Shooter is back, because I don't think Shooter played all that great in this game. I think it helped that the opponent was not great, but they're also, it's another game. They had another week of practice. Dave Laughlin wanted me to talk further on a Twitter exchange I had with Tyler Kluver of Washed Up Walk-Ons during the course of the game. I had posted something critical of Spencer, and Tyler replied back to me saying that he was at the game and he just he didn't feel that Petrus was playing all that poorly. And I mentioned something back to him where I think relative to Petrus, we're at a point where the cumulative effect of some of the things that Spencer continues to struggle with is becoming a problem. And the cumulative effect is impacting our opinion. Now, again, he's struggling. He's not at the level that he would even say that he should be at. But Tyler Kluver said back to me, it's definitely a situation where people want us to eat the whole buffet, and Petrus is giving us a satisfactory meal, but without dessert. It's an interesting opinion. Tyler played football, played for the University of Iowa. I respect his opinion. I don't think Tyler would sit here and try to pee on you and tell you it's raining. You can listen to his podcast this week and say that Spencer's playing great. But maybe it is a lot of micromanagement or just picking on the micro. Brent Ross, how huge was that third down conversion on the screen to Tracy? I thought Petrus did a nice job, especially on third downs. Do you think this was enough to quiet the doubters? No, the doubters are rolling in still. Did the defense get exposed by giving up all those big plays? No, they did not. The defense gave up 7 points, and the defense gave up 265 total yards. Kent State was 3 of 13 on third downs. The defense was not exposed at all. By the way, Iowa's offensive line gave up 0 sacks in this game on 36 dropbacks, 36 pass attempts, 0 sacks. That's really good. I totally overlooked that earlier. I just pulled the stat sheet up to counter this last point, and I noticed that. So, no, the defense was not exposed. The game of football is still judged by how many points you score versus how many the opponent scores. Iowa has given up 2 field goals to Indiana. They gave up a touchdown today. And Iowa State had, 1 touchdown against Iowa? Was it 1? Right before? No, 2 touchdowns. The touchdown in the first quarter and then the touchdown right at the end of the half, and that was it. Defense is doing fine. There's no exposure going on here. Mike Phelps says, feels like the coaches are working conservatively due to what they have, i.e. experience and such, versus what everybody seems to be thinking they should be doing. I think people need to realize that Petrus can only do what's available versus forcing it. See Chuck Long's podcast with Tom Kakert and Crossing Routes and such. I listened to that podcast this week with Bob Stoops on it, but I didn't listen to the previous one, and I'll go back and listen to it. And I think there's some merit there. I had some Twitter exchanges with a few people in this game this week. And, I mean, Tracy and Jones and Reganey are not big targets. They're all under 6 feet tall. Keegan Johnson's a bigger target, but he's young. Arlen Bruce is also a smaller target. Both Johnson and Bruce played today. Bruce got his first ever catch. It's not all on Petrus. he's just the one that we see, and what we see relative to a quarterback is maybe most obvious of anything. Okay. A lot of people, especially people watched on TV, you can't pick up the nuance of, did they run the right route, or was that route? It's tough to pick up that nuance, especially just for average Joes. And I'm not much beyond an average Joe. It's difficult to pick up that nuance. It's difficult. I wish I could see the all 22 film each week, because that would really be beneficial for me, just to see exactly, okay, is Spencer missing more than I think, or is he missing less than I think? Are these receivers not getting off their jams? Are the routes not? There's so much to it. Joseph Batten says, why put Padilla in and not let him throw? Because it was 30-7 and Kirk didn't want to rub somebody's nose in it. Pretty sure that's it. Derek Hutton says, game day in Iowa City for Penn State. Could be. I've not been here in a long time. It's been since September 30th, 2006. I remember that because it's the last day that I ever drank. Not been since the wave started. That's true. If Iowa and Penn State are undefeated for that week, there's a chance. There's also a couple of other pretty good games that week as well. So just depends. I mean, they're in Big Ten country this week with the Penn State game. Last week, they were at Iowa State. Where were they week one? I don't know. Do some of you, if you want to send that to me in the chat, you can definitely, where was ESPN Game Day week one? I don't know. I rarely watch that show. I'm just not really super interested in it. So there's a chance, but I don't know. Let's see what other games there are that week. Iowa football, ESPN. That is going to go here. Football schedule, NCAA football schedules. So that's week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, week 6. We go to the NCAA football schedule, week 6. Let's see what we've got to compete with there. Yeah, so that is Iowa, Penn State. So you've got Alabama at Texas A&M. Alabama is presently number 1. Texas A&M is presently number 7. You've got number 2 Georgia at number 22 Auburn, and you've got Iowa at Penn State, which could be a top 10 battle there. You've got Notre Dame number 12, Virginia Tech. They lost, so no, they'll be out. Number 20 Arkansas at number 17 Ole Miss. So I don't think it'll happen. I think it'll probably be an SEC team. We'll see. We'll see though. Moving on. Dan Schuett says, oftentimes football teams are one injury away from disaster. Ricky Stanzi. Who is Iowa's most irreplaceable player? That's a really good question. I was joking last week that it could be Charlie Jones. Might not even be a joke. If you took this player away, how significant would the loss be? Let's just not say Petrus right now for the sake of I don't want to get into that quagmire again. Is it Tory Taylor? Is it Tory Taylor? Or is it Jack Campbell? I don't know. Taylor, Campbell, Jones, Goodson, maybe one of those. Good question. Chad Clinton, what Big Ten team was most impressive so far this weekend? How about Minnesota winning 30-0 at Colorado and holding the Buffs to less than 70 yards of total offense for the game? That's impressive. I don't care if Colorado is the worst team in the Pac-12, holding a Power 5 team. That's to less than that yardage. That's money. Matt Van Heulen, we don't want Bama, do we? We do not want Bama. We talked about last week. We do not want Bama. Ryan Rockhold, is IKM in the KF doghouse after the fumbles? Yes, he is. Todd Weeks, Tory Taylor leads the country in completion percentage. Well done. This comes from James Meehan. Why continue to put mileage on Goodson late in the game? Gavin Williams showed some good footwork in a north-south style. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. I think that's a fair critique, if you will. Seems like a lot of penalties for Iowa today. That comes from Joe Farrell. That is true. 8 penalties for Iowa for 72 yards, 6 for 47 yards for Kent State. Trip Noki Knoki, I'm sorry, Trip. Is Nebraska back or is Oklahoma a paper tiger? I don't think Nebraska's back, and I don't think Oklahoma is that great. But you got to give Nebraska credit. Wait a second. No, you don't. Chris Bryant, how soon do we start worrying about Tory Taylor, who is age eligible, and Campbell going to the NFL? I don't think Campbell per se. I hadn't considered Tory relative to the age eligible. Maybe. I think Tory Taylor is straight out of Kirk Ferentz' best dreams, because every defensive series, the first play, it's a punt, and Iowa has the best punter in the nation. It's pretty amazing. I forgot, I saw Torque Mason over here, and Ben Siders also in the chat saying Linderbaum would be up there on the most indispensable players. You guys are exactly right, and I'm an idiot. That is going to do it. Boy, and a lot of these questions were similar. I really appreciate those of you that responded. 74 responses and counting, including one from one of my business partners who sends me Kansas State related questions because he's a Wildcat and he thinks he's funny. It's not funny. It's not funny, D. It is kind of funny. So one more week of practice. One more week of practice where you get to focus on what it is that you aren't doing well, and you can come out in the next game and work on those things as much as you want and not probably risk losing, because you're bringing that top 5 national defense. You're playing a bad opponent. Honestly, Iowa's defense could, and special teams could outscore Colorado State next week. Could. So what a gift Iowa has given themselves with this 2-0 start and now 3-0 start. This week, it's almost like a bye week, except you get to go out and you scrimmage. You get a scrimmage against somebody that doesn't know your plays inside and out the way that the defense knows the offense, and vice versa. It's an incredible in-season gift. And then you will have a bye week coming up at some point in the next month or so. I think a lot of improvement can be made from where we are right now to when they travel out and they play Maryland in 2 weeks. And Maryland squeaked past Illinois last night. Illinois, Brett Bielema made some really dumb decisions late in that game. Really dumb. And he knows better. And I'm sure he wishes he had it back. Maryland very well should have lost that game to Illinois at home. But Maryland, they're a Big Ten team. They've got some athletes. Tagovailoa at quarterback's getting better and better. They have an NFL caliber receiver, but Iowa should win that game as well. And if they can do that, they'll beat Colorado State next week, and Maryland on October 1st. And that basically gives Iowa also an additional day's worth of preparation for Penn State, because Iowa plays Maryland on a short week of prep. And it's probably not a bad thing having a short week of prep the week after you're playing Colorado State. Great opportunities abound for Iowa with the way this schedule is setting up. And then after Penn State, you get Purdue at home on October 16th. Then you get your bye in advance of Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, if I believe, Wisconsin plays Purdue prior to playing Iowa. So anyhow, and actually, what's coming up next week? I think Penn State it's either next week or the week after the next. Penn State. No, who plays Kent State? Maybe Maryland plays Kent State next week. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. Have a little fun comparative scoring, folks. One last thing I would ask, if you listen to this podcast and you like it, if you could take 15 seconds and go to iTunes or whatever podcast service you belong to and leave a review. If you like it, leave a review. If you don't like it, okay, then don't leave any reviews. But the more reviews there are, the more easily other Iowa fans can find this podcast, and there it is, and everybody's happy. I enjoy doing this, and like any person that is in entertainment, you always want more and more people to see what you're doing. It's a lot of fun. So please, if you are enjoying this and you like it, please tell other people about it. Send it to your friends. Hey, did you know that Miller's back? Doing podcasts. Morehouse and I tried to hook up this week. It just didn't work out. Marc's working on weekends, so his schedule's kind of mixed. We're going to try to get together and do some of these together, but I will be here, and we'll be here again next week. We'll try to get something done in the middle of this week. I'm not going to do a Colorado State preview. Probably once we get more into the Big Ten schedule, we'll do the in-week stuff as well and some more posts. But as always, thank you very much for listening. And those of you that were here watching it live on the YouTube live channel, really appreciate you as well. And we'll see you